I was reading Gandhi's collected works, and there was much discussion of what was called back then the women question. And he was writing all the articles espousing women's rights. And then there was in India the question of the Dalits, the most oppressed of the castes. And Gandhi said that he was a stronger defender of Dalits' rights, D-A-L-I-T, Dalits' rights. He was a stronger defender than any Dalit. He felt very confident that he could speak for women's rights and Dalits' rights, and that he was an abler and more eloquent defender of those rights than any woman and Dalit. And I have to say, I kind of, to use the expression of your generation, it felt a little cringy when he was saying that. So how do you react to that, Sohil Patel?
We get Sohil unmuted. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, that makes me a little uncomfortable. I think the word eloquence kind of has a practical meaning. I don't doubt that the people that Frederick Douglass referenced was probably they were probably, sorry, my cat's walking around. They were probably more eloquent, could write better than most slaves. But I think that that's a very specific kind of thing. I doubt they had the internal experience anywhere close to what a Black person in that time felt. And so I think eloquence has a certain meaning, and maybe Gandhi could speak more eloquently on behalf of Dalits than any Dalit that he knew. But yeah, I mean, that's like a term of sort of public discourse, I think, and it's useful. But I think it shouldn't be mistaken for the actual experience.
Let me ask you this, Suhail. You say that these white defenders of Black rights or the wrongness of slavery, you say that probably they couldn't really know what it was like to pass through that experience. My question to you is, what exactly do you need to know beyond the fact that slavery is an outrage to any concept of a common humanity, or an outrage to being a human being? For example, if we read about things like country X practices torture against dissidents, or country Y discriminates when it comes to housing or jobs or things like that, or country Z is imposing a brutal economic blockade against a defenseless population, isn't that knowledge sufficient without knowing the experiential reality of being a victim of that suffocating blockade, being a victim of that torture? Do we really need to know more than any person is capable of articulating, which is to say, do I need to know what waterboarding feels like in order to know it's wrong? Do I really need more to know? Mr. Sohail?
Yeah, that's a nice, easy question. Well, I generally speaking think that there is a distinction between abstract knowledge and experiential knowledge. So whether something is right or wrong, that's a kind of a binary thing. And I think we'd all agree here, waterboarding is wrong. We don't have to be waterboarded to experience it. And I think all of us would agree on slavery as well. But at this point, maybe the distinction may be more useful when it comes to maybe more subtle forms of discrimination, where it may be even hard to express. It's just like for example, I went to school and it was like my brother and I were the only two non-white people in my school. And how do I convey that to, my wife? I probably couldn't even convey it to myself at the time, like what that was, having grown up in the United States, I also feel out of place in India. Like what is that about? And it's kind of a specific feeling that sometimes it's hard to put words to. But I mean, I think on the question of, I think the question of slavery and things like that, I probably agree. Like I think I could be persuasively argued to think, sort of a huge range of things are wrong. But I don't think that works. I don't think you can simply, how do I put it? Just through articulation, express the full scope of what it's like to, be on the wrong end of a particular injustice.
I won't comment right now. Let me ask Steve Romanelli, who I've only recently come to correspond with. I'm going to put the question to Steve this way. Mr. Romanelli, are you there?
We're unmuting him at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, hi, I'm here.
Okay, so I came to know Mr. Romanelli because he's working with prisoners. So, Mr. Romanelli, in order to understand the injustice of the situation that prisoners experience on 10,000 different levels and in 10,000 different ways, do you feel you can articulate that injustice, or do you have to be a prisoner?
Well, I do feel you can articulate it in the same way a doctor doesn't have to have cancer to explain or understand what cancer is. So I do think you can articulate it. In the same way, I just read a book by Barbara Klingsover, Demon Copperhead, right? It's a great book. And she's writing about a young male, she's an older woman, writing about a young male drug addict. And it's completely, unbelievably believable. So I do believe that you don't have to experience something to eloquently express the situation. But I would put one little small qualifier on something that we said earlier when Douglas was talking about those guys who were very eloquent in their description of what was going on at the time during that time in U.S. history. And he said, well, those white guys spoke as good as anybody. Well, we have to remember that most Black people, Frederick Douglass was an outlier. He was unusual in that he was literate. Most Black people were illiterate. So all the James Baldwins of that era never had the opportunity to be James Baldwin because of their oppression as slaves. So that's just one small qualifier I would put in there. But to answer your question, I do believe you don't have to fully experience something and able to articulate it well.